Hello, I'm Neil Thompson. I'm here to talk to you about professionalism in social work. Now, British social work has an interesting history when it comes to professionalism. When I first started in social work many years ago, the dominant model of professionalism then was what I would call a traditional model. It was quite an elitist model. It was based on the idea that professionals know best, that professionals have the answers, that they have the solutions. And it was very much a top-down way of looking at professionalism. Now, when radical social work came along, there was a conflict around this because clearly that sort of traditional approach to professionalism certainly doesn't fit with social work values, especially radical social work values. So there was a contradiction in terms of ideas around partnership, empowerment, social justice. If the model of professionalism we're operating on is the idea that as professionals we are somehow a cut above the rest, that we are on some sort of platform. So radical social work then was very critical of that traditional model of professionalism, and quite rightly so as far as I'm concerned. Now, let me make it clear right from the start that I think radical social work was a very good thing. It has been very useful in putting issues around discrimination and oppression on the agenda, very helpful in terms of promoting a commitment to social justice. But one problem with radical social work was that instead of rejecting the elitism inherent in traditional professionalism, what radical social work did was to reject professionalism altogether. So we moved from a stage in our development where professionalism was seen as this elitist we know best idea to becoming a sort of anti-professionalism in a sense. So under the influence of radical social work, professionalism came to be seen as a dirty word. It was seen as somehow putting a distance between ourselves and the communities that we were there to serve. Now, as I say, I think that was a mistake. What should have happened was the rejection of the elitism, but not the rejection of professionalism. Because consider the alternatives. What's the opposite of professional? Are we unprofessional? Are we amateurs? Is this what we're trying to put across? So clearly there is value in the idea of being professionals, provided that by professional, we don't mean this traditional idea of somehow we know best, that we're different. There needs to be a consistency between social work values and the idea of professionalism. So after the social work influence came to bear, we had this phase of anti-professionalism. But that didn't last very long in its original form because people started to question whether or not we were a profession. So we then went into a phase of confusion about professionalism. I've run many training courses, for example, with social workers where I've said something along the lines of, how would it be if I were to say to you after the break, we're going to do a debate. We're going to have a debate as to whether social work is a profession or not. And I've asked the participants to tell me whether they think that is a reasonable thing to do on a training course or not. Now, I've lost count of how many times I've done this over the years, but believe me, it's many times. And every single time, the response from the social work group has been, yeah, of course, that would be a reasonable thing to do on a training course, to have a debate about is social work a profession. What I would then do is say to the group, imagine I was training a group of nurses and I were to say to them that we're going to take a break now. When we come back after the break, we're going to have a debate about whether nursing is a profession or not. And then I asked the social work group what they think the nurses' reaction to that is likely to be. And it's pretty unanimous what people say. They say words to the effect of, they would probably lynch you, Neil. And I think that's along the right lines. So it raises this question of, why would it be okay to have a debate about whether social work is a profession or not, without offending anybody, whereas the chances are other professional groups like nurses would probably be quite offended if we questioned whether or not they're a profession. So, as I say, a complex history, an interesting history. Now, that era of confusion about professionalism we're starting to come out of now. We're talking more and more about what does it mean to be a professional. So my contribution to this has been to write a book called The Professional Social Worker. And in that book, what I talk about is the idea of authentic professionalism. And what I mean by authentic professionalism is forms of professionalism that are consistent with social work values. So they're not based on the idea that we know best and we will sort your problems out for you. It works on the basis of partnership, that we work together. We use our knowledge expertise with the knowledge and expertise of the people we are supporting and serving. And we also operate on the basis of empowerment. So it's not using our professional power for our own ends, but using our professional power to help people gain greater control over their lives. So that's why I emphasize partnership and empowerment as key elements of an authentic approach to professionalism. So that's the sort of historical picture in a nutshell. Of course, there's a lot more that could be said about it, and I go into much more detail in the book, but that's it basically in a nutshell. That we went through to at the beginning of my career, the focus on professionalism was a very uncomfortable one because it was this elitist we know best idea. Then went through a phase of that being strongly challenged, professionalism being rejected by the radical social work movement. Professionalism became a dirty word. Then that led into a period of confusion about are we professionals or aren't we? And we're now at a significant point in our development where we're starting to say, yes, we are a profession. We are professionals, and that's important. But we are striving to be authentic professionals, to link our professionalism to our professional social work values, particularly around social justice. So, having cleared that up, what I want to do now is to talk about some issues around what professionalism is all about. Now, rather than waste a lot of time having a philosophical debate about defining professionalism, I want to look at its characteristics, and 6 characteristics in particular. The first one I want to look at is the idea of professional knowledge, because what we have to recognise is that in social work we have a significant professional knowledge base. If you think about what is involved in qualifying as a social worker, what you need to learn, what knowledge base you have to have available to you, it's quite significant. It's actually quite a huge knowledge base. So we've got knowledge around psychology, sociology, social policy, the law, philosophical issues around ethics and values, linked into issues about discrimination, oppression, social justice, empowerment, and so on. And that's before you start to think about particular groups of people that we work with and the knowledge base around them. So in terms of children, child development, that sort of thing, around working with older people, with people with disabilities, mental health issues, issues around young offenders, whole range of things where there is a significant knowledge base for us to draw on. And then, of course, added to that, there are the particular methods and theoretical approaches, the models that we draw on. So issues around task-centered practice, strengths-based approaches, solution-focused work, crisis intervention, a whole range of significant things that bring with them a knowledge base that can be useful. And that then interweaves with all the other elements of knowledge that we can draw on to make sense of the complex issues we encounter. And for me, that's part of what makes social work a profession, in a sense, is that a key part of what we're doing in social work is managing complexity. If the issue wasn't complex, the chances are it wouldn't land on a social worker's desk. So part of managing complexity is we need a knowledge base, and we have a significant knowledge base available to us. So professionalism is about using that knowledge base, and that's how it links with reflective practice, being able to think through the issues we deal with, use our knowledge base to make sense of them. So that's the first thing then, professional knowledge base. Then there's also a professional skills base. If you think about it, the range of skills that we draw on in social work is quite significant. It's a huge range of skills. For example, in my people skills book, there are 30 chapters, and each chapter addresses a set of skills that we use in social work. And that book is not comprehensive in the sense that there are other skills that I couldn't squeeze into the book. There wasn't room. So what we have to recognise is that social work is a highly skilled job. We have a set of professional skills that is actually quite broad and quite significant. And hopefully we're able to take those skills to quite an advanced level. For example, I'm a firm believer in the importance of non-verbal communication. Now, the majority of people will learn the basics of non-verbal communication at an early age, as we grow up. But my argument has long been that as professional social workers, what we need to do is to be fairly expert in our use of non-verbal communication, how we put people at their ease, for example, how we read the subtle cues when we're working with a family, for example. These are skills that can be taken to quite an advanced level very, very fruitfully. So, knowledge base, skills base, but that's not all, because linked to both of those is the idea of a professional value base. And a key element of this is that, by definition, professionals have power. We are in a position of authority, which brings with it certain aspects of power. Now, where power is being exercised, then there needs to be a value base. There needs to be a set of ethics to make sure that that knowledge and those skills are being used ethically, that they are being used responsibly. So that's the starting point for our value base, is to recognise that using our knowledge and skills has to be done in an ethical way. And then that links into the value base of all the different values that drive us forward. The desire to treat people with dignity, for example, our attempts to tackle discrimination and oppression, to promote empowerment and so on, to be authentic in what we do as professionals. These are all values issues. So professional knowledge, professional skills, professional values, 3 key elements, but they're not the only ones. There's also professional accountability to take into account. Now, I want to emphasise very strongly that there's a difference between professional accountability and blame. Accountability is actually a positive thing. What it means is that we're being trusted. To be accountable means that we can be called to account. From time to time, somebody can ask us, why did you do that? Can you give an account of the decision that you made? Why did you take this course of action rather than that course of action? And I don't know about you, but I think that's a perfectly reasonable expectation of any professional, including social workers, that we're not just doing things at random, that we're doing things for a professional rationale. That there are reasons why we do things, so that if called upon to justify our actions, we can do so. Now, as I say, that's a positive thing because it means that we're being trusted. Blame is where we're being attacked, where we are being treated unfairly, and that is something that is not part of professionalism. We shouldn't confuse that with professionalism. Okay, so knowledge, skills, values, and accountability. The 5th element I want to talk about is professional development. One of the expectations of being a professional is that we get better at the job over time, that we improve, that we continue to develop our knowledge, our skills and our values, and that we are going from strength to strength. The opposite of this is what's known as plateauing. Plateauing refers to the process of improving up to a point, and then we sort of flatten out. So like a plateau is a flat mountain. Plateauing refers to how people learn the basics until they feel comfortable and confident enough to get the basic job done, and then, if I can mix my metaphors, they then coast in neutral. They get stuck on this flat bit. They don't continue to improve. But the idea of a professional is that the longer that we've been in the job, the better we are, that we're constantly improving, constantly learning. So when we talk about CPD, continuous professional development, I'm not talking about ticking boxes. I'm not talking about just getting brownie points to be able to re-register or whatever concerns you. What I'm talking about is a genuine, authentic, professional commitment to getting better over time. The longer we're in this job, the better we are at it. That's a key expectation of professionalism. And then finally, in terms of the 6 elements that I want to look at, is the idea of a professional body. Now, that is in 2 senses. There is professional body in terms of being a member of the British Association of Social Workers, or whatever the appropriate group is in wherever you are located. And now that in itself is important, to have that sense of professional identity by feeling part of a professional body, of supporting and being supported by our professional association. But there's also another more abstract sense of professional body that I have in mind. And what I mean by that is that as social workers, we're part of, in a sense, a global community of people who are committed to making our society a more humane society. We're committed to helping, supporting and empowering the most vulnerable and disadvantaged members of our communities. We're committed to promoting social justice. Now, in doing that, we are part of this wider community, this wider family, if you like, of social workers across the world. And that is really, really important, that we have that sense of professionalism, that we are part of, in a sense, a global movement for improving society in whatever ways we can. We don't have magic answers, of course, but what we do have is that commitment to making a positive difference wherever we reasonably can. So you may have somebody, for example, who is very happy and contented in their work. They love their work, but they don't necessarily feel part of a wider community of professionals that they share. You might have somebody, for example, who is a salesperson. They enjoy their job, they do it well, they get a lot of satisfaction from it, it makes them quite happy, but I doubt whether they feel that they are part of a global network, a global community of salespeople. So we have that benefit in social work, we have that advantage that we are part of a wider global community committed to making societies around the world better than they are, to make them more humane. We are part of that humanitarian endeavour, if you like. Now, those are the main 6 areas that I associate with professionalism. I'm not saying they're the only ones, but to my mind, these are the key ones, the most important ones. But what I would add, which sort of underpins all 6 of those elements, that for me, a key part of being a professional is wanting to do the best job that we can. There's an interesting term called satisficing that's often used in the literature relating to organisational studies. And satisficing is a made-up word. It's a combination of satisfactory and sacrificing. Satisficing. And what it refers to is where people are quite happy to just do the bare minimum to get by. So good enough is good enough. I'm getting the job done, nobody's complaining, that will do me. Now, my view is that as professionals, we don't want to settle for that. As professionals who are committed to making a positive difference, what we need to be doing is trying to do the best job possible, to make the maximum difference, not just enough to not get into trouble. So defensiveness is not something that we want to be entertaining. It's about being prepared to focus on what we think is important, to stand up for what we think is important, and significantly to support one another in doing that, because that again is part of this idea of being part of a social work community, that we should be supporting one another, whether that's formally through our professional networks or informally just by being good colleagues and supporting one another. Now, I'm very conscious that because of cutbacks, austerity, and the political situation in terms of neoliberalism over not just a few years now, but going back decades, that the pressures on social workers are immense. The difficulties are significant. So I can understand that at times morale can be quite low. But for me, as professionals, what we need to do is to pull together, support each other as best we can, and do the best we can in difficult circumstances, rather than allow low morale to lead us down the path of burnout, to make us cynical, to make us defeatist. That, yeah, it's challenging. It's extremely challenging working in social work, but that's what makes it a privilege for us to be in social work, that we're honoured, or should be honoured, to be part of this global community of people trying to make a positive difference, trying to promote social justice, trying to make our society a more humane society. So there's much more I could say about professionalism, but we've run out of time, so I'm going to leave it there and wish you well in your endeavours to make professionalism a real positive reality in your work. Thank you for listening.